Tower of Fire.
I put in the wrong tea leaves again, didn't I?
There is a great disturbance in the force, Tower of Fire, and you must correct it.
Well, come on, how bad could it possibly be? A 5 POA Star Wars figure? I mean, they're pretty bad, but I wouldn't really call them disturbance worthy.
Take this one out of the packaging, and you will see.
Okay, whatever, dude. No, this can't be. It's
good, isn't it?
It's not true. That's impossible!
That's your feelings. You know it to be true.
No! No! Enough of this reference stuff. You need to settle the disturbance. Okay, Vader, I'll try. Hey, you shut up! I can talk about whatever I want to! Oh, hey, Pigeon, what do you want? Huh. I wonder what his problem was. Hello, my friends! This figure's legit good. Now, before you call me completely nuts, let me explain why this figure succeeds and others of its kind fail. To start with, I think we need to have a basic explanation of why articulation is desirable, and why 5 POA tends to be rather problematic. An action figure's worth can be divided into 3 categories: how it looks, how it feels, and what you can do with it. The first 2 categories are dependent on sculpting, paintwork, and plastic quality, which the 5 POA figures have in varying degrees. But what you can do with it can make or break those other 2 categories. Now, mind you, when I ask what you can do with it, I'm not asking how many points of articulation it has. A figure can have less points of articulation than another, but still be able to do more because of the execution. For example, this DC Multiverse Christopher Reeve Superman has multiple points of articulation, but he lacks bicep swivels and the ability to look up. You know what I can do with him in a normal display? Almost nothing. The Superman Returns figure, however, has less articulation, but I can do more with him simply due to the head joint. There are less articulation points, but I can do more with what is on this figure than was on the Multiverse figure. One other example? This Black Panther figure has a few more joints than this Black Cat figure, but you try and do something cool with Black Panther and he's likely to fall. Black Cat can straight up do this, however, and thus I consider her a superior figure. Now, let's look at 2 5 POA figures. Let's start with Baze Malbus. Now, all the detail on his outfit is pretty good, but I want you to focus on his eyes. In a year where Marvel Universe eyes were looking like this, and Marvel Legends eyes were looking like this, these are a straight up miracle. Also, how about we take a look at the Stormtrooper from Rogue One? This is straight up gorgeous. Never before has a Stormtrooper's armor been so perfectly captured in the 3 3/4 inch scale, even if they might have cheaped out on the blaster a little bit. Man, such an awesome sculpt, I just want to pose it. Maybe if I... Nope, I can't do anything with it. And now we have a problem. Both of these 5 POA figures passed the looks test, basically passed plastic quality, but then they left you with complete disappointment. The sculpts and paint apps delivered so well that you just wanted to grab it and pose it around with all your other figures. But you ultimately discovered that they can only do one thing: stand in one neutral, uninteresting, generic pose for all eternity. You only ever pick them up when you dust your shelf, and every time you do, you'll be left with this desire to make the figure awesome. To make a scene on your shelf with them, rather than just stick them in the back like a weird wallflower. However, these guys can't dance like everyone else. All they can do is stand in the background while your more articulated figures embody the essence of the character that they represent. Because they can represent it, either through subtlety or by a whacked out pose of action. That's what articulation is all about. It's a means of expression through the characters you love. And if you have an entire line where you can't do that, then all of its progress in sculpting and paintwork are meaningless to you, because ultimately they'll leave you feeling empty. This isn't just true with collectors, however. Kids will get the message too. Want to know a small reason why I liked Woody over Buzz as a kid? Because you could do anything with Woody during play. Cool as Buzz was, he has multiple restrictions with his joints, and was thus not as fun to play with, even if I did still love him to death. Additionally, I have a distinct memory of playing with my brother's highly articulated Spider-Man from the 2002 movie, and being impressed with the fact that he could open and close his middle fingers, because that was more that I could do during play. To delve into this further, let's look into some direct comparison figures from The Last Jedi and Solo. I distinctly remember being shocked at the fact that this Justice League Action Superman was selling at the same price as an average Force Link figure during November of last year. Now, this Superman is unable to look up still, but look at all the other articulation he has. His quality is also pretty great, with very few blemishes in the paintwork. He also has these accessories that kids may not use, but I'm sure are appreciated. All of this just goes for $7.99. So what does a Force Link figure offer for the same price? A smaller figure with little to no accessories that can occasionally talk with a stupidly designed gauntlet that is sold separately for way too much money. What a deal! Now, you may be arguing about sculpting and paintwork right now. After all, Superman is representing a cartoon, whereas the Force Link figures are representing a live-action property, thus making this an unfair comparison. I, however, would argue that you're only saying this because you are an adult who thinks about budgets for toy companies, because you're aware of it. Kids don't care about budgets. They don't think about sculpting and paintwork and budgets. They think about what fun the toy will be. And guess what? A 5 POA figure is probably going to fail next to a figure like Superman for them. But hey, how about some more direct competition? What would that be? Oh, I know! Jurassic World! Now, I don't own any of these because I don't really care about Jurassic Park that much. Sorry, guys. But these figures pique my interest because of one thing. They have the same amount of sculpting and paintwork, but look! They have articulation! Decent articulation! For $7.99 last I heard! In the exact same scale as the Star Wars figures. Now, tell me, if you had to choose between Jurassic Park figures and figures from a movie about young Han Solo, and you could see the lack of value for cash in the Solo figures, which one would you want to buy as a kid? Now, after all that ranting, you might be wondering, how does this figure fit into all of that? Well, let's look at him and find out. To start with, look at that sculpting. The details on the robes are nice and crisp, and while the paintwork is minimal, it does the job well, and even continues under the brown robe, where it wouldn't even be seen normally. Nice job. The face is particularly good and really captures the likeness of Al Guinness, which kind of shows how far we've gotten in action figure likenesses. We've gone from much larger figures barely hitting the mark, to almost dead-on likenesses for children's toys in just a few years. His lightsaber is pretty basic, but I do like this thing that they're doing with him now, where it's more of a straight and clear pole, rather than not being able to see through it and having this weird energy effect at the bottom. It's not that I hate those other lightsabers, of course, I'm just saying that this is better. And I really don't care about that missing paint app on the handle, as it's really small potatoes that I can fix myself if I need to. Now to the part that sets this figure apart, the articulation. Now, he does have a standard ball-jointed head, and legs that go forward and back pretty well, but his arms are really where it's at. You see, rather than a straight forward and back motion, these arms are on pegs that make it more of a faux ball joint that allows him to put his hands on his hips, or hold his lightsaber with both hands in a dueling pose more proficiently. This little bit of extra articulation, paired with his pre-posed arms, gives the figure a lot more character on the shelf, and leaves you feeling satisfied whenever you pick him up off that shelf. This figure rose just high enough above the other garbage in 5 POA to stand out to me, and for that it should be commended. That figure presented a question to me that I needed to find out the answer to. Have I been wrong about 5 POA this whole time? Or was that just a fluke? Well, yes and no. Alright, let's tackle the pre-posing first. The shock of a good 5 POA figure got me wanting to look into this, and thus I grabbed the Force Link Gauntlet and Kylo Ren. Since it was only $10 at the time, I knew I'd be needing it for this video because that's the gimmick. We'll focus on the Gauntlet a bit later, but for now, let's focus on Kylo. Well, detail-wise, he's not much different from the more articulated Force Awakens figure I have, so let's just skip that for the most part. No, let's instead focus on this pre-posing. Now, his arms are fine for the most part, and he does look alright if you barely do anything with them. Maybe tilt the head or raise his left arm, but that's about all you can do. When his cape is off! Seriously, this thing is a massive pain. It's stiff enough that it can stand on its own, and due to draping over his shoulders, it restricts the arms a bit. You can still do the force choke pose pretty alright, but his good vanilla pose is almost completely obscured, thus ruining any uniqueness you might have had among 5 POA figures. Not that he's gonna be doing that much anyway, since his arms annoyingly swivel at an angle, which is never a good idea. And his legs are really frustrating to mess with, and it's mostly thanks to that pre-posing. On Obi-Wan, the pre-posing was a benefit, since it allowed us to use the extra articulation more effectively. This guy has nothing extra, and what he does have is hindered by his pre-posing, so it's not always a benefit to have it clearly. Let's move on to my next two examples, Emperor Palpatine and Luke Skywalker. Palpatine is pre-posing done right again. And while he doesn't break any articulation once beyond 2 certain points, he's a character that doesn't really need to. In this case, they really nailed the mere presence of the guy in a vanilla pose. This guy is the embodiment of subtlety in posing, as all you need to do with him is rotate his left hand. Which, oh yeah, some figures can do that now. So I guess it's now more of a 7 POA. And it's much better for it. Okay, so we've got 1 figure at a bad ranking, or 2 if you want to step outside Force Link, and 2 in a good ranking. However, our 2 good ones are characters that don't really do that much. So let's rank a character that does do a lot. Luke Skywalker. Now here's a figure that shows the best thing that's come out of 5 POA. Way better sculpting. Not only is his outfit nice and iconic, but the face sculpt is the first time in years that he hasn't had a bit of an anorexic look to his face. They focused on the likeness for this one. I think it says something when this face is better than another one in a 6-inch collector's line. His pre-posing is also quite nice, as it gives him a stance that is plain, but still ready for action. You can also have a variation of this by just rotating his wrists and raising his left arm. He's not really able to do much else, but again, I'm feeling satisfied because I can do something with him. And I have a choice. And the choices I do have aren't limited by the pre-posing. So I guess that's 3 good ones against 1 or 2 bad ones. Is 5 POA redeemed? Nope. While I do love the good figures that I got from the line, you may have noticed that they only got that status because they deviated from the 5 POA formula. Pre-posing, articulation cheats, or just more articulation in general, it doesn't matter. The 5 POA formula is straight arms and legs with non-expressive hands, and every single one of these figures broke that in some way. It ultimately just exposes why 5 POA doesn't work. The formula is not to be expressive with your figures in any way. They're to just stand there, unsatisfying, and bland as a stormtrooper. And even they aren't satisfying me that way. If you want a figure to be satisfying, you need to have useful joints that let you express the character it represents. That goes for both play and display. If you're unable to do that, then why even bother? But hey, who needs expressive poses when you can express yourselves with stock voice clips, am I right? Okay, so I'm not some man-child slapping this thing like a drunk chimpanzee, but I'm not going to deny that this thing is frustratingly designed. Let me tell you how you're supposed to operate this thing. Okay, so first, you put it on straight up like any normal person would. Then you need to twist it until it's just a bit away from your thumb. And then you need to awkwardly fondle the figure until you somewhat resemble the position in the instructions. And then you pray that it detects the chip in the foot and says more than one phrase. Though it rarely does. They expected $30 for this thing. And it's not even worth the 10 I spent. Okay, let's dig into the various design flaws with this thing. First off, you have to put it near your thumb instead of on top of your hand, which on top of being extremely uncomfortable, is way too much of a pain to do. And I don't imagine any kid would want to interrupt their play session just to make sure their gauntlet is in the correct position. Same goes for holding the figures a certain way. Also, the design of having to whack it with the Maya Zeus to turn it on is bad, and the voice feature would be much better if you could just press a button to activate them, rather than having to rescan the chip. Which will likely just make them repeat what they just said. This gauntlet feels like the designers had good ideas, but when they couldn't figure out how to make them work in a way that made sense, they just went, good enough, and we ended up with this. The biggest praise I can really give this thing is that if you turn it upside down, it makes a really good web shooter for man-children, who always promise never to use the silly string canister if they got a real one. Mom. But you know what the saddest part is? We got this feature right years ago! Hey guys, you remember Rescue Heroes? I remember Rescue Heroes. If Bionicle was my Transformers, then Rescue Heroes was definitely my G.I. Joe. Okay, so eventually Rescue Heroes did talking figures, but they actually went all out with it. The figures often came with backpacks that would activate their phrases. The bases had backpacks that you could activate their phrases with, and even the vehicles had hookup points that you could activate their phrases with. Even if you didn't have one method, you could still get the phrases through another, and thus the feature was justified. The Force Link Gauntlet is the only way to access the sayings of these figures, and that's just dumb. Why not allow the vehicles to access the chips? Or that BB-8 playset? Heck, if you wanted to go all out, you could even have special phrases for certain vehicles and playsets. It helps sell the line as a whole. So, what have we concluded here? 1. 5 POA does not satisfy in standard form. 2. In order to make 5 POA satisfying, you have to deviate from the 5 POA formula. And 3. The Force Link Gauntlet is trash. I think we've said enough here for today. I'm Bento Fire, signing out. Okay, Pigeon, you ready?